So we finished gene flow. I use myself as an example for gene flow. Now let's go to non-random mating. Non-random mating, and an example is the breeding of the dog breeding or horse breeding, or I should say dog breeding. Breeding of the dog is a non-random mating. The reason is that we human beings select the so-called desired trait for the dog to have. For example, for bulldog, nowadays people think that okay, the bulldog is cute if they have a lot of wrinkles. So the dog breeder, what the dog breeder do is that they, when they have a bulldog, when they make the bulldog, when they have a bunch of baby bulldog, they will pick the baby bulldog that has lots of wrinkles and then raise them. And then for the rest of the baby bulldogs that they don't have a lot of wrinkle, guess what? They will just kill the rest of them. Yeah. So only the baby bulldog that has a lot of wrinkle can live and raise, and then after this they keep on mating those baby bulldog that has lots of wrinkle. And in this case they can keep on producing lots of bulldog that has lots of wrinkle. The reason is that nowadays people think that okay, bulldog with wrinkle is cute, so they will buy the bulldog that has more wrinkle. And in this case, then the dog breeder can sell the so-called cute bulldog, which is actually very harsh. And we call it non-random mating, or you can call it artificial selection. It is not a natural selection, but it is an artificial selection to select for preferred trait. The thing about random mating is never occur in the natural population because female, they always select mate with a certain trait that enhance their survival. Because, for example, for birds, if the bird shows a very colorful feather, that means the bird is very healthy because you need to be healthy in order to generate those pigmentation. So in other words, for female bird that they select to mate with the male that has colorful pigmentation on the feather, then in other words, it is not a random mating. It is not a random mating. It is actually a non-random mating because females select the trait that indicate the male are healthy to mate with those healthy male. In breeding, is an example of non-random mating. Remember several classes ago, I told you about inbred mice. Inbred mice, I told you, is the white mice, the laboratory mice. They are all inbred because they all have the same gene. They all have the same allele. The reason is they just keep on breeding with their family, so eventually they all have the same gene, theoretically, but more or less the same, theoretically. That's why we call it a non-random mating, because the farm or the company who raised the laboratory mice to sell to the laboratory, they intentionally breed them in this way. The increased frequency of recessive abnormality in human beings and also in mice, as I told you before, those laboratory mice, they all will have cancer when they get old. It's because of this reason. Natural selection. We will talk more about natural selection in class, but you can consider it's the basics of it. So, for individual that has advantage over other, they will produce more offspring. As I told you, like the previous example, the male birds that has a brighter feather color, then the female will select to breed with them. Then the male with brighter feather color, then they can pass on this trait, bright feather color, to the next generation. So we'll talk about how Charles Darwin explained evolution through natural selection in the class. But evolution by natural selection requires 4 events. Individual variation, you must have individual variation, meaning that, think about the opposite example that I told you before, laboratory mice. They are all the same, they all look the same, their gene, theoretically, they are all the same. So what happened is that when they mate, do you think that they will, the Hardy-Weinberg equation or the allele frequency or genotype frequency, do you think these two frequencies will change? Or do you think that they are in the genetic equilibrium? Of course, after you made them for many, many generations, when you made them again, they all look the same. They all have the same trait. In other words, the laboratory mice is an example that a population has achieved Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium or genetic equilibrium. That's why there's no natural selection and there's no individual variation. When there's no individual variation, that means there's no natural selection, so that there's no evolution occur in those laboratory mice population. Inheritance. The trait that is of the trait that occur in a certain population, the trait must be able to pass on to the next generation. And a famous example is the mule. A mule is produced by crossing horse and donkey. You have a mule. The mule may have certain trait, but unfortunately, because all mules, they are infertile. So they cannot reproduce, they cannot have kids. That's why all the trait from the mule cannot pass down to the next generation. So there's no inheritance for the mule. Overpopulation. You must have overproduction in a population in order to get natural selection. The reason is that when a population is overproduced, that means you will have more consumer than producer. That means all the population, all the individuals in the population, they compete for the same resources. When everyone is competing for the same resources, then there is a famous saying, survival of the fittest. When everyone is competing for the same resources, only the fittest individual can survive. In this case, we will have natural selection. The last is called differential reproductive success. For example, if a wolf chases after a rabbit, okay, it's a very natural story. A wolf chases after a rabbit. Only rabbit that has longest and strongest leg, they can survive, because if they have long and strong legs, they can jump or run really quickly to escape the wolf. But rabbit that has short and weak leg, they cannot run or jump that fast, run or hop that fast. Then in this case, they will be captured by the wolf and killed. And in other words, only the rabbit that has this long and strong leg can survive. In this case, the rabbit with long and strong legs, they will have a so-called higher reproductive success than the rabbit with the short and weaker legs. In this case, we see the differences in the reproductive success between one population of rabbit that has long, strong legs and another population of rabbit with weak and short legs. In this case, this is what we call differential reproductive success. Yes, today is a short video lecture, but I can assure you that the next video lecture will be extremely long. It will be a lot longer than this. So you will have fun and enjoy today's short lecture. Next time, the next online lecture will be extra long. Which is the last lecture about evolution, which will be extra long. So stay tuned. If you have any question, please feel free to ask me in class, because in class we will talk about evolution as well.